Hey everybody, Ben here for the Bonehead podcast and welcome to Special Teams Sunday. Every week we get together and we have a look at some of the best unofficial teams in Blood Bowl. We've looked at the rulebook teams, we've looked at teams of legend teams, we've looked at the NAF expanded teams, but Blood Bowl is a fantastic game full of fantastically creative players. And homebrewing up teams is something that I'm sure everybody's done in one way or another, but there is a thing called FUMBBL. Now FUMBBL is a JavaScript old school version of Blood Bowl, but it is awesome. And within it there is a secret league, and within the secret league there is something like 80 fantastically put together teams. Now today we are going to be looking at the Dryad team. Paul Jacoby suggested that we had a look at this because he started building one, and it is a very cool team. Now we saw this team in action in Bonehead Bowl or one of the Secret Carnage tournaments, and it's really interesting. We got to watch some of the play on FUMBBL with it. Now this team, like FUMBBL, is still in the 2016 rule set, so there's no passing stat just yet, so the rules are slightly off. I know that there are rules there in draft form for Blood Bowl 2020 version of this team, but until FUMBBL starts playing, I don't know if they're going to be able to port it over correctly. So for now, we're going to look at the 2016 rules, and I'll leave it down to you to port it over or just to go and have a look at the 2020 rules instead. So, the Dryad team. There are Dryads, and then there are bigger Dryads. There are no Treemen, it is just Dryads. So the Dryad team is made up of Dryads and 3 different forms of Dryads. So the whole idea here is that Dryads are people made of branches, okay? They're kind of like tiny tree men. And by tiny I mean the same size as humans, based on the fact that tree men are the size of trees. So you've got Dryads. Dryads were a big part in Warhammer Fantasy Battle from probably the 4th edition, primarily in a Wood Elf army. Now they still exist in Age of Sigmar as the Sylvaneth, okay? So they are that kind of bush tree humans. Then in this team you've got Birch Form, Oak Form and Willow Form. So the whole idea is you've got Dryads and then you've got these types of Dryads that excel in one area or another. Now the Birch Form, where it comes with Frenzy, kind of fulfills the role of the Blitzer. It's got good agility and good speed. Then you've got the Oak Form and the Willow Form. So the Oak Form is tough as heck and immovable, whereas the Willow Form has got lots of tangly leaves and branches to trip up players and keep them in place. Really interesting team. 60k rerolls means it's kind of medium to be able to fit everything in. You can only take 6 positionals, which is a bit of a shame with this team because you can afford basically all of those immediately. And it's what we see from some of the Secret League teams is you kind of buy everything and then you run out of stuff to build. I think this team does suffer from an element of that. However, with the positionals and the players, the skills just make them far more interesting. So let's have a look at the Dryad and their stats. Okay, so the Dryads fill the role of the linemen in this team. You get 0 to 16 of them, and they are 50k apiece. Movement 5, Strength 3, Agility 3, and Armor 9 makes them... That's right, they are orcs. They are orc linemen. Now, I'm sure there's some coaches out there that thinks, Dryads, Wood Elves, nonsense, 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 who are actually like orc and dwarf coaches at heart. I imagine your ears just picked up a little bit because Movement 5, Strength 3, Ag 3, Armor 9 for 50k is a bargain. Alright, the movement is a little bit subpar, but Strength 5 is still faster than some players, which is useful. And that Armor 9 means they're going to be sticking around a lot of the time, which kind of makes sense with Dryads. They're not as fast as humans, but they are tougher. Now that Ag 3 means that they're going to do everything that they want to do all of the time. General access means you just fall into the lineman trap with these guys. Block is great, you know, wrestle's good, kick is good. With this team, a Dryad with sure hands is probably a good idea. Think Beastman, think Norse. Actually, a lineman that can pick up the ball, pretty useful guy. And talking of useful guys, we've got 0 to 2 Birch Form Dryads here. So they're movement 7, strength 3, ag 3, armor 7. So Skaven stats at that point, they're 70k apiece and they come with Frenzy. So they are your kind of pseudo blitzers. They don't have combat skills, but they do have that frenzy. Now the cool thing about this team is that the Oak and Willow forms tend to perform the role of a blocker, which means they normally have strength access, which means a cheeky bit of guard on this team is going to mean that these players here can absolutely smack people around. Now general and agility means they are primed to be picking up Blodge on their first and second skills. Block first, then your Frenzy becomes really useful. Dodge, then you become really defensive. And Edge 3, you know, that's an Edge 3 plus Dodge away with Dodge is actually a really useful skill. And Movement 7 means that they can cover a ton of ground. So while your linemen tend to do a lot of the work, these Birch Form Dryads are must-haves in this team. Speed 7, Frenzy can be a downside, but it can also be a massive boon. But Movement 7 and Edge 3 means that they are absolutely motoring around. The downside is that Armor 7, which is pretty low, so if you can, taking an Apothecary is also quite important for this team. Now we're going to look at some of the meat on this team. So you get 0 to 2 Oak Form Dryads. These are 90k a piece. You can only take 2 of them. I've missed the graphic up a little bit. Movement 4, Strength 4, Agility 1, Armor 10, and Stand Firm. So these are the Oak versions of the Dryad. They are there to be Oak-ish. Okay, Strength 4 means they're going to be blocking people on 2 dice most of the time. Ag 1 means they're not going anywhere most of the time. Armor 10 means that they are not going anywhere most of the time. And Stand Firm means, that's right, they're going to stay in place if they get punched back. Now that Strength 4 is going to be a massive deterrent. It's going to be really useful. General and Strength, you're kind of torn between the ultimate challenge of a blocker here. These guys go on the line and they stay on the line. They want to punch and survive being punched. Now with Armor 10 and Strength 4, they are going to survive being punched most of the time. Stand Firm means that they are excellent at holding their avenue as well, which means when you're defending with this team, you can deploy Stand Firm pieces wide. So if you're going in chevron formation, you can put your Oak Form in each of the wide zones, and they are basically going to cover those 3 squares, and they're not going anywhere against most teams. The benefit of that is that block is good, and guard is good, and mighty blow is good. So this player gets great no matter what angle you go. It really depends on your league. Taking guard on these guys is really useful and can help kind of turn on the Birch Form Frenzy Blitzes even more. Okay, that little cheeky bit of guard means that those guys are 2-die, 2-die. They're making 4-die blocks basically off the line on offense. That can be really useful, but let's not kid ourselves. Having Strength 4 block is also pretty good. And the last piece of the Dryad puzzle is the Willow Form. So the whole angle here is Willow trees have the big branches that look a bit like tentacles. So this player has got tentacles. So 0 to 2 Willow Form Dryads, 110k a piece, Movement 5, Strength 4, Ag 2, so slightly better agility and slightly better movement than the other bulky form of the Dryad. Armor 8, less armor, but prehensile tail and tentacles to show the fact they've got all those vines and branches just grabbing other players and getting in the way. General and Strength access again means that block is fantastic, guard is going to be really useful for your team, but chucking a cheeky tackle on this guy means that prehensile tail, tackle, tentacles means that whoever you put this dude on is not going anywhere, and Strength 4 blitzing at any point with tackle is a fantastic safety. Now Movement 5 is just enough to deploy them both in your backfield and get good coverage on defense, and when it comes to this team, having all 4 of the blocker style Dryads is going to be really useful. The 2 Willow on the inside, basically having those 5 squares means they can cover the entire backfield between themselves, and then you've got the 2 Oak Forms on the edges with that Stand Firm guarding the edge route. Is really going to mean that your opponent is going to have a tough time breaking through your team, and then you've got those 2 Movement 7 Frenzy dudes as well that are going to perform a pretty good role of being a safety. So the team comes together really well. Now the Willow Form, having prehensile tail and tentacles, is pretty useful. Now in 2016 edition, tentacles at Strength 4 is fine. In the new edition, I think it's probably a little bit better. Prehensile tail is going to be useful too. That's why I do like the idea of tackle on this guy, but realistically block is probably the better first skill. So let's have a look at a starting roster for the Dryad team. So 5 Dryads, 2 Birch Form, so that's 2 of the Frenzy Blitzers at Movement 7, 2 Oak Form, that's 2 of the Strength 4, Movement 4 Stand Firm pieces with Armor 10, and 2 Willow Form, which are the Tentacle, Prehensile Tail, Movement 5, Strength 4 pieces, with 3 rerolls and an Apothecary comes in bang on 1,000. Now, you don't have any combat skills. You do have a lot of strength to kind of counterbalance it. The other thing you could do is downgrade basically one of your other forms, so potentially drop one of your Willow Forms and then boost up the Apothecary to a reroll to kind of counterbalance it. Is definitely something you could do, or just drop the Willow Form into alignment and take 4 rerolls and an Apothecary. I really like the idea of having all 4 of those Strength 4 pieces, and in fact if I was going to drop a player, it would probably be one of the Frenzy Blitzers. but you lose movement. It's a tough one. I like this roster. Over time, you want to add a few more Dryads to get that bench, but you've got that Apothecary to keep your 6-star players alive, which is going to do enough for you. 3 rerolls is just fine. Once you've got that 12th player, once you've got that extra Dryad, because you've got the Apothecary, you should just be able to save up to 120k and pick up that next reroll while you're just brewing that team. Now, this team having armor 9 across the board, essentially. Armor 8 on the Willow, armor 9 on the Oak Form. No, armor 10 on the Oak Form, and armor 7 on the Birch. The Birch are vulnerable, but the rest of the team's got really good armor, so you should be able to not die, especially where you've got one Apothecary on your team. So this roster gives you everything, and it gives you a really good opportunity to try out each of the players, and it makes it a pretty fun challenge when you're playing against them, because they're kind of like an orc team with a few extra skills and a little bit less power. It's clever. Okay, so let's talk models. So Dryads, you need Dryads. There is a box of Dryads from Age of Sigmar that will fulfill this role perfectly. Now, the cool thing about these models is they come in and they are a little bit slight. They do look like Strength 3 players. They don't look massive. Now, you can kit bash these guys to be the rest of your Dryads, but I do have a better suggestion. However, one box is going to give you enough linemen to do anything, and we've seen some clever players use these as linemen for other races as well, with a cheeky bit of conversion for their positionals. So Rich Saxby brought a team to Bonehead Bowl, which was these guys as skeleton linemen in a Tomb King army, team, which was quite cool because then he could run tree men as the Tomb Guardians, which worked out brilliantly. So you can pick up some of these guys for your linemen and some of these guys for the positionals. So this box is from Games Workshop, and it is, what is it, Tree Revenants? The Sylvaneth Spite Revenants. So you've got these guys, but they also can form, it's a dual part kit. The box also makes these Tree Revenants. So what you can do is kind of pick up one box, and then you've got a combination of players. So you've got these guys with the hair, so 2 of them to represent the Willows, plus some of the extra arms and things left over from the Dryad box, so you can get that tentacles, prehensile tail feel about them, and then bounce over and have 2 of the other guys who, let's face it, look far more menacing, the Spite Revenants, these guys here, to be the Oak Form, just combat pieces. I love these models, and I know it's quite an expensive way to kit bash, but if you've got nothing to do for Blood Bowl, you can do it, and you have some cool fun building them up. So that wraps up Dryads in Blood Bowl. Now, Dryads is a team I think Games Workshop might brew into in a few years' time. I did think they'd bring them in to replace Amazons, to give them that kind of fragile version. However, this one is more of a bruiser version, which does make sense, because in Warhammer Fantasy, they've got good toughness, generally speaking. So I like it. This team brings with it a really unique set of challenges. You've got 2 sets of 2 unique blocker positionals. You've got a bit of frenzy in there as well for offense, and your linemen are just orc linemen. Now, every orc coach knows how good orc linemen are, because you are always faced with the option of using one of those instead of a thrower, and it does create excellent choices on the pitch. You start with 3 unique sets of positionals that feel very different and do very cool stuff to begin with. The downside of this team is there's nothing left to buy. If this team had a tree man on it for 120k, you would give you a different build, another alternate build. I'm a big fan of alternate builds. This one is a little limited on positionals, but if you are running between 1 million and 1,200,000, whether it's a secret league tournament or just going standard league, it's going to be just fine. You start off with that roster I recommended. You've got 11 players. You buy a 12th player and you save up for your 4th reroll. That's going to take you, with some skills, probably to about 1,200. Anything more than that, your Dryads just tend to turn into a bit of like combat machines. And then maybe you go up to 13 players when you kind of hit 1,400 TV. The Dryad team at that point, you've got 4 strength 4 combat pieces. You've got probably a couple of frenzy gods, and you've got some good linemen as well. That's going to perform pretty decently. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. Do let me know what you think of the Dryad team in the comments below, and let me know what other Secret League teams you want us to look at, or non-Secret League teams, because we are just looking at unofficial teams. In fact, we're going to be looking at some homebrewed ones in a few weeks' time, and I'm very much looking forward to that. Anyway, I'm going to disappear. Thank you very much for watching. We'll be back soon with more Blood Bowl content. Happy blocking.